Have you ever had that feeling that something just doesn't add up? Like when a story is told again and again, but deep down you can't shake the sense that there's more to it? That's exactly how many people feel about Marilyn Monroe's death. On paper, the official story says one thing. But behind closed doors, whispers tell a very different version. Marilyn Monroe. She wasn't just a movie star. She wasn't just another actress in Hollywood. She was the face of glamour, the woman who lit up every room she walked into, and someone who the world adored. But at the same time, she was also one of the most vulnerable and lonely women in the public eye. And when her life ended in 1962, the headlines made it sound like a tragic accident. An overdose. A star who couldn't handle the pressures of fame. That's the story most people were told. But here's the question that keeps coming back: what if Marilyn didn't die from an overdose at all? What if something much darker was going on? What if she was silenced? Now, this might sound like the plot of a thriller movie, but it's a theory that refuses to fade away. People believe Marilyn Monroe was killed, not by her own hand, but by powerful forces who wanted her quiet. Some say the mob had been waiting for the perfect time to strike. And the reason? Her connections to two of the most powerful men in the United States, President John F. Kennedy and his brother, Robert Kennedy. Think about that for a second. Marilyn Monroe, the most famous woman in Hollywood, romantically linked to the President of the United States. That alone is shocking, right? But it didn't stop there. Rumors swirled that she also had a close relationship with Robert Kennedy. Whether those stories were exaggerated or completely true, one thing is certain: she wasn't just living in the spotlight of Hollywood anymore. She had stepped into the dangerous world of politics, secrets, and power. And that's where everything started to spiral. Friends of Marilyn often said she was emotional, outspoken, and unpredictable at times. She was the kind of person who wore her heart on her sleeve. And she had apparently started talking about revealing her affairs to the public. Imagine what would have happened if she had done that. Imagine the newspapers. Imagine the scandal. A beloved movie star, exposing the president and his brother for their secret relationships. That wouldn't just ruin reputations. It could damage political careers. It could shake the government itself. And this is where things start to get chilling. Because when someone holds that kind of information, they aren't just a celebrity anymore. They're a threat. A liability. Someone who needs to be controlled, or worse. Now let's bring in the mob. Because when we're talking about the 1960s, organized crime wasn't some rumor that lived in the shadows. It was out there, woven into everyday life in America. The mob had their hands in everything: politics, businesses, nightclubs, unions, and yes, even Hollywood. They weren't just characters you saw in movies. These were real men, with real power, who had no problem doing whatever it took to protect themselves. They were smart. They were strategic. And above all, they were ruthless. If someone became a problem, that person simply didn't last long. And according to many theories, Marilyn Monroe became one of those problems. At first, she was just seen as entertainment. A glamorous, exciting woman who powerful men like John F. Kennedy and Robert Kennedy wanted to spend time with. To the mob, maybe she seemed harmless. A beautiful actress caught up in the game of power. But things shifted when Marilyn started hinting that she might go public with her affairs. That's when the danger really began. Think about what would have happened if Marilyn Monroe had stepped in front of microphones at a press conference and said, "Yes, I've been with the President of the United States." That wouldn't have just been gossip. That would have been a national scandal. It could have damaged the Kennedy family beyond repair. It could have opened doors for their enemies. And for the mob, who had connections to political power, it could have threatened their entire system of influence. So the theory goes like this: the mob decided Marilyn Monroe was too risky to keep alive. She knew too much. She was unpredictable. And she was talking too much. For them, the math was simple: better to silence her than to let her bring the whole house crashing down. By the summer of 1962, Marilyn was already showing signs of breaking. Friends described her as feeling betrayed and abandoned. She had been cut off from people she trusted. Her relationships with the Kennedys were growing complicated. And at the same time, her mental health seemed fragile. She felt like she was losing control, and when someone is in that emotional state, they might say things they shouldn't. This is when she allegedly began threatening to hold a press conference. Imagine the headlines. Imagine the frenzy. Marilyn Monroe standing in front of reporters, exposing the president, exposing Robert Kennedy, and dragging America's most powerful men into the harsh spotlight of scandal. If she had gone through with it, the story would have shaken the world. But according to many people, that very idea, that threat to go public, was the mistake that sealed her fate. August 5, 1962. That's the date the world will always connect to Marilyn Monroe. Officially, the report said she died of an overdose. The image painted was of a lonely star, too fragile to handle her demons. It was a story people could understand. A Hollywood tragedy that fit neatly into the headlines. But the details from that night? They don't line up as neatly as the official report suggests. In fact, they raise more questions than answers. For one, there were missing phone records. Entire chunks of information just gone. Why? Who erased them? What were they trying to hide? Then there were the conflicting witness statements. People who were there, or who claimed to know what happened, couldn't seem to agree on the timeline of events. And then there's the strangest detail of all: her housekeeper reportedly washing her sheets in the middle of the night, right after Marilyn was found. Now ask yourself, who does laundry at a time like that? A woman has just died, police are investigating, and the housekeeper decides to clean sheets? It makes no sense. Unless someone wanted to erase something. Erase evidence. Erase any trace of what had really gone on in that room. Does that sound like a simple overdose to you? Or does it sound like someone making sure the truth never sees the light of day? And it doesn't stop there. Because years later, more information came to the surface. FBI files revealed that Marilyn Monroe had been under surveillance. Yes, America's sweetheart, the most famous woman in Hollywood, was being monitored by the government. Imagine that for a second. She wasn't just a celebrity being adored by millions. She was a woman whose every move was being watched, because of her connections, because of what she knew, and because of what she might say. That detail alone changes everything. If the FBI thought she was important enough to monitor, it means she wasn't just a glamorous actress caught in a romance. She was someone caught in the crossfire of politics, power, and organized crime. And when you're in the middle of that storm, one wrong word, one wrong move, can change everything. Let's step back for a moment and look at this like a game of chess. In chess, the most powerful pieces aren't always the ones that decide the game. Sometimes, it's the smallest, most vulnerable piece that tips the balance. Marilyn Monroe, in this story, was that piece. If she stayed quiet, the game continued. The Kennedys could go on with their careers. The mob could keep its connections strong. The government could avoid scandal. Everyone kept playing. But if she spoke up, if she exposed everything, the entire board could collapse. The king could fall. And when that kind of risk is on the table, sometimes the vulnerable piece is sacrificed. Not because it's the most important, but because it threatens the survival of the whole game. That's the chilling part of Marilyn's story. To think that a woman who brought joy, beauty, and laughter to millions could have been seen as disposable. To think that instead of being remembered for her talent, her life may have been cut short because she became a liability. That's not just sad. That's devastating. And yet, this is the question people have been asking for decades: was Marilyn Monroe just another Hollywood tragedy, or was she silenced because she knew too much? The official version says overdose. But conspiracy theories say mob hit. The truth? That's the part we may never fully know. What fascinates me is that even after all these years, people still can't let go of the mystery. They still question. They still search. They still feel deep down that something isn't right. And maybe that's because, as people, we know that the truth doesn't always make it into the headlines. Sometimes the truth is buried, cleaned up, hidden away, and left for us to piece together with whispers and theories. So let me ask you, what do you believe? Do you think Marilyn Monroe's death was just an accident, the tragic ending of a complicated life? Or do you think it was something far more sinister, a calculated move by people who needed her gone? Do you believe the mob had a hand in it? Or do you think she was simply overwhelmed by her struggles, with no foul play involved? I'd love to know what you think. Share your thoughts in the comments, because this is one of those mysteries where every perspective adds something new. And if you love exploring these kinds of stories, where Hollywood glamour collides with dark secrets, then you'll definitely want to check out my other video on a similar case. Trust me, it's just as intriguing and will keep you thinking long after it's over. If you enjoyed this deep dive into Marilyn's story, go ahead and hit that like button. It really helps more people find these stories. And if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel. Ring that bell so you never miss out, because there are so many more stories like this waiting to be told. And who knows, maybe one day, the truth about Marilyn Monroe will finally come out. Maybe one day, someone will reveal what really happened that night in August 1962. Until then, we're left with questions, with theories, and with the haunting feeling that the story we were told isn't the full story at all. But that's the thing about mysteries, isn't it? They stay alive as long as people keep asking questions. And Marilyn Monroe's mystery? It's one that will never stop haunting us.